worked really closely with Kimber Howell over the last couple of years, right? And she talks about how she's confident in her ability. She says it, right? That's an attitude. It's a choice. Confidence is a choice, right? She chooses to be confident in her ability. Right now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Jack Kelly, who just got selected to his third Team USA. Yeah. Arguably the best goalie in the world at one point, had a significant ACL tear, had multiple complications, and came to me to be able to help him get back on the field, and was identifying that everything that he was doing physically was getting to a point, but mentally and psychologically, he was having trouble, right? And one of the things that he talks about is just how grateful he has always been to wear the colors and the letters of Team USA. So I'm going to cite my boy Jack Kelly in this talk as well. But these are real examples of people that I've been fortunate to have the privilege to work with on a daily basis. And we're going to talk about how these things apply to them and how they can apply to you as well. Let's talk about effort, right? Let's talk about effort. So when we talk about effort, a lot of us think that means running harder, pushing faster, getting in more reps, right? That's physical effort, right? But I want to talk about mental effort, right? Because I think it's so important to also put our intention into what we're doing mentally. When I talk about mental effort, what I'm talking about is think about before each practice, identifying 3 areas of focus, 3 things that you want to work on. Now, your coaches have their practice plan. You're going to do your drills. You're going to do your exercises, but identify 3 areas of focus that you want to do before each practice. Alternatively, or in addition, you could also identify 3 things that either you learned or you need to work on after practice. So when you go into a practice, think about what are 3 things I want to focus on today, right? That's going to direct your attention. It's going to direct your focus, okay? It's going to help you start to actively learn because you're thinking about what do I want to get out of this? So you're actively going to be thinking. It's going to increase your focus, right? When we learn, right? When we actively learn, our brains actually get more excited. They release certain chemicals. One of the chemicals they release is dopamine. Dopamine actually helps with motivation. It helps with effort. It helps with organization, and it releases anxiety. So again, by tapping into the brain's learning process and identifying what do I need to focus on, that's going to actually allow you to release certain neurochemicals in your brain that you're going to be able to improve your focus, your attention, your organization, and you're going to be more likely to learn those things. Again, when you talk about 3 things that you learned, a lot of times we leave practice and we don't want to think about it or we overthink about it. But identify what are 3 things that I learned or one thing I learned and 2 things I need to work on, right? Think about writing these things down, right? A lot of you guys are, student athletes, right? Think about when you're in class, you write things down, you take notes, that helps you learn, right? And when you're learning, again, you're able to go back, you're able to review those things, it solidifies it in your mind. So many of us, we leave and we try to remember, right? We say, okay, like I'm going to remember that. And then we come back and we get nervous or we get anxious and we forget. So by writing things down, you can go back, you can review it, but even in that moment, you can improve it, okay? Now, I said 3 areas of focus, right? Why did I say 3, right? Why did I say 3? A lot of people come in, they think about one thing or they think about 12 things. Now, everybody who's listening right now, imagine that I'm asking you right now to tell me your phone number, right? And without saying it super out loud, but say it loud enough. Go ahead and say your phone number out loud. Everybody, go ahead and say your phone number out loud. Now, as you're saying it, think about the way you group those numbers, right? You probably grouped them in, everybody that's in the States, right? In the United States, you probably grouped them 3, 3, and 4, right? My number is 410-908-2377. That's how I say it. That's how I think about it. Our brains learn in chunks of 3 to 5. Our brains learn in chunks of 3 to 5. So when you think about 3 areas of focus, it's consistent with the way your brain learns. It's consistent with the way your brain works. So when we're out there and we've got all these things we got to keep track of as a goalie, it's difficult. We get overwhelmed. We forget things. 3 areas of focus is consistent with your brain's learning process. Again, it's going to release those chemicals and it's allow you to stay more focused, more organized, and reduce your anxiety level. As goalies, as athletes, so many of us identify ourselves by the end product, right? Our save percentage, right? We go by certain save percentage. We go by certain stats. That's how we define whether we were successful or not, right? I'm a big believer in processivity over productivity. When we think about the outcome, we get more overwhelmed, we get more anxious. Now, every time a shot goes in, we're thinking, that's going to mess up my save percentage, right? Every time a shot goes wide, are they going to count that as a shot? Was that not a shot? We get so caught up in the outcome and what the statisticians think, what our coaches think, what the other players think, that gets us away from what we need to do. So when we think about the process, what are the steps that we need to do? Again, that's going to reduce our anxiety level. When Jake Stover was in college in his last year, he was starting to become notable for an All-American, right? They were talking about that, right? And there was a period of time where he started to really evaluate his stats and what he was doing and what he was scoring and what that meant and where he would be in the All-American voting and all those things. And what happens, he had a couple games where he made some key mental errors. And I was at one of his games, and afterwards we talked. I said, Jake, tell me about that play. And he said, yeah, I wasn't thinking. I said, what were you thinking about? He goes, well, I had saved this other shot. What happened was he had saved a great shot. And then when he went to go throw the ball out, he just kind of short-armed it. And immediately he threw it right to the attack player. The attack player came back and scored. He said, well, I was thinking about that shot, and I was thinking I saved that shot. Now my save percentage was at a certain number. And so I quickly went to throw the ball out, and I just wasn't even thinking. And so we really talked about, I said, listen, for the next couple games, right? I think there were 4 games left in the season. I said, I don't want you to focus on your save percentage. Let somebody else do it. I said, I don't even want you to evaluate your save percentage. I want you to focus on what are the steps to stop a shot. What do you need to focus on every day to stop a shot? That's what you focus on, right? That was hard for him. But what ultimately ended up happening, he had no idea what his save percentage was. And 4 games later, it was much better than he thought it would have been. And he got voted All-American, right? So the idea is let's really break down the process, think about 3 to 5 steps on what you want to do. And that areas of focus is going to allow you to be more likely to get successful. Always do one more, right? This to me is about effort. This is a saying that I use a lot. Whenever I'm training, whenever I'm working out, right, I always do one more. So if my workout calls for 10 reps of something, I always do 11. If I'm running sprints, even if I'm a goalie, if I'm running sprints and there's 10 sprints, I always do one more, okay? As a goalie, when you're taking shots and your goal is to take 25 shots, always take one more, right? What we're doing when we do one more is we're training ourselves and we're training our brain to believe we can always go a little bit extra. It doesn't have to be 10 more. It doesn't have to be 15 more. But we're training ourselves to always do a little bit extra. Always do a little bit extra, right? Most athletes, when a workout calls for 10 reps, they do 10, right? Most athletes. The hardest working athletes will do 10. Some of them will shortcut and do 9 or 8. But everybody on this call, I imagine, does 10. But if you all now commit to just doing one more, just taking one more rep, one more shot, just one more, you start to realize I'm doing more than everybody else. I'm always doing a little bit more than everybody else. So when it comes down to the end of the game and you're like, man, I don't know if I can stop another shot. Like the ball keeps coming over here. Why can't my defense stop them? You know, I can take one more save. I can take one more shot because I've always done it. I've trained my mind to believe that I can always do one more, right? This is incredibly important. I'm going to give you an example. Remember I told you earlier that I did hell on a hill, right? 65 laps up and down this hill. I always do one more. So I'm going up and down this hill, up and down this hill. What happens is when you get to 5 laps, there's a computer chip. There's a computer chip and there's a screen. But the thing is, the screen, you're moving so fast, you can't really see the screen. And you guys can't see it right now, but I'm on the shorter side. I'm 5'4", right? So I'm a little guy and there's all these guys ahead of me. I can't see the screen. So I have a clicker too. And as the clicker goes by, I click it. Every time I cross the line, I click it, I click it, I click it. So I get to 60 laps. They give me a wristband. It says I have 5 laps to go. So now I come up and I do 64. I come up on my 65th lap. And as I'm about to finish my 65th lap, I tell myself one more, do one more. And then I remind myself, you know what, Dr. T, this is a hard challenge. There's a lot of people that aren't going to finish this challenge. This is not the time to showboat. This is not the time to have a little bit of extra swag. Like, don't be a jerk. Like, this is a great event you did. You busted your tail. You're finishing really, really well. Like, you're going to get injured. This is stupid. So I don't do one more. I finish it. I'm excited. I'm happy. I look at where I finished. I finished in like the top 20%. About 2 weeks later, the results come out for Hell on a Hill. I get an email. I click on it. I'm looking for my name in the top 20%. I don't see it. I don't see it in the 50%. It says click here for more names. I click and my name is at the bottom. It says I only did 64 laps. Somehow, either I miscounted or they miscounted. Chances are I miscounted. If I had done one more, it would have been enough. I still would have finished in the top 20%. But I cut it short, not realizing it. So my advice to you is sometimes one more is enough to do extra, and one more sometimes is enough to finish the game, right? Finish the game and have a complete game and play the way you want it to. So these are three things that we can really do. Three areas of focus: intentional, processivity, and always doing one more that's going to allow you to put your intention into your effort. And that's going to allow you to always push yourself to be the best.
Dr. T, this is amazing, amazing stuff. If I could ask a quick question on that first point, if you could back up.
Yeah.
Three areas of focus before each practice. Am I picking, are these like really detailed, like get my hands to the ball, step to the ball? Are these really like parts of making the save? Is that what I should be thinking about? Or it could be like, communicate with my teammates could be an area of focus, or have a positive attitude could be an area of focus. Does it matter where my focus is the question?
That's a great question. And I think it ultimately comes down to, as a goalie, what do you think you need to work on? If you notice that you're not getting your hands up or you're not stepping up quickly enough, then I would say that would be an area of focus, right? Right? Yeah. If you're noticing, listen, I'm not communicating effectively enough. My defense doesn't know what I'm seeing. That might be something it is. If you notice, listen, I tend to shut down and therefore it looks like I'm not actively engaged. Maybe I need to work on my attitude, right? I think my attitude's fine, but I'm getting feedback from my defenders and my coaches that I need to be more positive. Then how am I going to do that? And so your areas of focus can be whatever it is that you need to focus on, and they can change. So they can be as detailed or as technical about the process of making a save, like getting your hands up and stepping up. And they could be sort of more about the process of being a leader on the field, like communicating, or it could be about the process of being a great teammate, which is having a positive attitude, encouraging other people, even if nobody on the defense did their job and you let the goal in, looking at the defense and saying, that's okay, guys, next time, let's get in position. We got this, right? All of those things are going to allow you to also feel better and also tell your team and communicate with your team that even though I'm back here, we're all together. So it could be any of those things.
I love it. That's awesome. The chat's been kind of quiet. I want to hear a couple areas of focus that you guys want to work on, or that you guys want to take to your next practice. If you could throw that in the chat, if we could. Dr. T, this is great. Let's keep going.
Absolutely. So let's talk about attitude, right? Because attitude is something that coaches love talking about, right? They talk about having a positive attitude, a negative attitude, a good attitude. It's important to understand what attitude is, right? What does attitude truly mean? Because I think sometimes we say these words and then we don't define them the way that they're meant to be defined. So in the field of psychology and psychiatry, right, they've done a lot of studies and they've shown that the way we think directly impacts how we feel, which directly impacts what we do, right? And so I drew it out linearly, but if you think about a triangle, if you all are out there taking notes in your notebook, think about a triangle. At the top, write thoughts. On one corner, write emotions, and on the other corner, wrote actions. And draw an arrow from thoughts to emotions, right? Draw an arrow from emotions to actions, and draw an arrow from actions to thoughts. Once you've drawn those arrows out, I want you to put the arrow on both ends. So not only do your thoughts affect your emotions, but your emotions also affect your thoughts, right? Not only do your actions affect your thoughts, but your thoughts also affect your actions. Each one of these things affect the other one. And the reason I bring this up is it's important to understand that we can choose how to navigate our attitude, right? And to me, the way we navigate our attitude is through our thoughts. It's through our thoughts. The way we think is in terms of language. We use words to communicate the way we're thinking, right? If you right now, somebody asks you, hey, what's on your mind? What are you thinking? You're going to use words. Even in your head, when you have thoughts in your head, we use words. Even when we have negative thoughts or negative self-talk, usually those are words that we're hearing, right? So we use language to determine how we think. And usually what happens is we put those words together in terms of statements. It's important to understand, too, that the human brain can only focus on two things, or focus on one thing at a time. It cannot focus on two things. So you can shift your attention, but you can only have one thought at a time in your head. So if you choose to put the thought in, that thought is going to influence or impact your emotions. It's also going to influence or impact your actions, right? So usually we do this in the form of statements or affirmation statements. And people love talking about affirmation statements, but most of the time when you ask somebody if they do it, when do they do it? They say, when I'm struggling or I'm nervous. And the problem is, again, when you're struggling, you're nervous, that's your emotions. Your emotions are running hot. That's going to impact the way you think. So it's hard to believe it in that moment. If we really want these affirmations to stick, we have to say them all the time. We have to say them all the time so we actually believe them. So Kimber Hauer has now developed the language of I'm confident in my ability. But Kimber Hauer says it every time she steps out to practice. She says it every time she's warming up. She says it when she's working out, right? The more she says I'm confident in my ability, her brain hears it. The more her brain hears it, the more her brain believes I'm confident in my ability, right? Think about each of you all right now. I see Coach Damon on my screen, right? If we're at like some huge event, right? And Coach Damon's nervous and he's anxious because somebody's asked him to come out of retirement and how he's got to play in this all-American game. And there's all these lax goalie rats that are coming to watch Coach Damon. They want to see, is this dude the real deal? Can this guy do it? And out of nowhere, I yell, hey, Coach Damon. Coach Damon will turn his head. Why will Coach Damon turn his head? Because Coach Damon has heard that name, Damon, associated with him his whole life.
Right.
So that thought has gotten an action. It's always gotten a response. He's always responded. When he was younger, he responded. When he was older, when somebody asked him, what's your name? He says, my name is Damon. When he was a kid, somebody said Damon, he turned his head. So no matter how anxious or nervous Coach Damon is, when he hears his name, he will turn and he will believe they're talking to him because he believes that's his name, because he's heard it. So if you really want to be confident in your ability, say it. Develop a plan where you say it every time you step out on the practice field, every time you step out on a workout, every time you do your homework, right? Every time you're doing anything, say, I'm confident in my ability. The more you hear it, the more your brain will believe it. The last thing I want to say about this, which is incredibly important, is oftentimes, so we're choosing our thoughts and we're creating affirmation statements. Oftentimes, we say the word don't. Don't let the ball in. Don't turn the ball over. Don't drop the ball, right? What happened, coaches say it all the time too. Don't do this, don't do this. Parents say it all the time. Don't raise your voice. Don't walk away from me. Don't touch that. The important thing to understand about the word don't is, number one, it's a negative word. It does not tell you what to do. So when we're talking about being positive, it's not a positive word. It's a negative word. Number two is it introduces doubt. So as a goalie, if you're thinking, don't let the ball in, now you're worried, what if I let the ball in, right? The other thing to understand that's really, really important, and most people don't get this, is that when your brain is really, really anxious, again, think about how our emotions impact our thoughts. When we get really, really anxious, a lot of times our brain will omit the word don't. It won't hear it. It will not hear it. So if you tell yourself, don't turn the ball over, your brain oftentimes hears, turn the ball over. Don't let the ball in. We hear it, right? Think about when you've had a heated discussion with an adult in your life and they say, don't raise your voice. Usually your voice goes right up, right? They say, don't walk away, right? Even in the military and the police force, they are trained, instead of saying, don't shoot, they're trained to say, hold your fire. It's very important what we say to ourselves, right? I'm not a big fan of the term, don't give up or don't quit. I'd rather say, keep going, keep pushing. Focus on what you want to do. Focus on what you want to believe. If you want to be confident, say, I am confident in my ability, right? So be really, really intentional about what we say. And this is about attitude. And this is about the language that we use to talk to ourselves. But when we talk about positivity and we talk about